Well, authorities in Kenya say a public transport strike against soaring fuel prices has been suspended for a week to allow for negotiations. Violent protests broke out on Monday as striking transport workers brought many cities to a halt. 4 people were reported killed and dozens injured in the unrest.
Roads normally bustling with traffic, largely empty in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, as the public transport strike over soaring fuel prices entered its second day. With commuters stranded, some opted to walk long distances, only to be met by more difficulty.
I got to work and found it closed. Now I'm heading back home.
You find the shops have been closed, maybe because people have not gotten to the required places they're supposed to be. So that's the biggest challenge. So I'm counting this day as a loss.
Now, transport officials and the government say they've reached a temporary agreement.
That the strike that is ongoing is suspended for a period of 1 week to provide an avenue for consultation, negotiation between the government and the stakeholders.
The state agreed to reduce the price of diesel, but transport operators are calling for deeper cuts. Fuel costs have reached record highs after the government raised prices for a second time last week. Kenya imports most of its fuel from Gulf nations, and its supplies are being choked by the Iran war. People took to the streets in protest on Monday. Demonstrators blocked roads and prevented motorists from passing. Police fired tear gas. Several people were killed in the unrest. Their deaths are being investigated. Kenya's Human Rights Commission has expressed concern over allegations of excessive and lethal police force against violent protesters. As calm and traffic return to the streets, Kenyans are hoping their government can ease the pain of soaring fuel costs.
Our correspondent Felix Moringa is on the ground for us in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Felix, what's the mood there today? Are you seeing people still on the streets protesting?
Well, the mood is quite relaxed today because life is slowly coming back to normalcy, but it's not yet normal because the street behind me would be abuzz with activity at this time of the day as people come from work, as buses crowd into the central business district. But if you can see, just the street behind me is as empty as it can get with just a few commuters walking, some of them coming from workplaces, just a number of buses at the bus stop, and things have not come back to normalcy. On this other side, the shops which would be open at this time of the day are still closed. They were closed for the better part of Monday and the better part of today. So life has not yet resumed to normalcy because when this afternoon the government officials and the transport stakeholders called off the strike, it was too late for anything significant to move. So life has not yet resumed to normalcy, but as much as people are not physically in the streets protesting at this time of the day, the frustration is still very heavy within the hearts of Kenyans.
Talk to us more about that frustration, because the protests in Kenya, Felix, started in response to rising fuel prices brought on by the war in Iran. Tell us more about how Kenyans are coping with the rise in the cost of living, the hike in prices.
Kenyans are barely coping because survival has become difficult for basic household commodities. People are not able to put food on their table. Things like vegetables have become expensive. People have even been making jokes about the cost of tomatoes, that if you can afford tomatoes in the country, then you're doing well. And that just speaks to the scope at which people have been trying to survive. The government has been trying to do a few things, and people do not still feel like there's anything that is moving. Survival is difficult. People are having to cut down on their everyday expenses. Some people are having to cut down on the expenditure in their households just to keep going. Other people are having to walk to their workplaces instead of using bus transport so that they can be able to save a few coins. And many of them have been crying out that the cost of living is becoming unbearable, and many of them are growing frustrated by the day.
Things are clearly tough for people in Kenya right now, and they have been tough for a while with prices rising even before the Iran war. Are Kenyans convinced, Felix, that the government there is doing what's needed to deal with this situation? What are you hearing?
On the contrary, Kenyans are convinced that the government is committed to not helping them at all, because people have been saying that the cost of living is spiraling. But on the other hand, Kenyans have been seeing political leaders and some of the leaders in government spending millions of shillings every day, either on choppers, either on private jets. Presently, as we speak, the president of Kenya is out of the country. He went through a trip in Azerbaijan. People are saying the president could have stayed here and seen to it that this crisis is addressed. But people feel that the government has been very distant from some of their everyday struggles. And the government tried to make a little bit of intervention by reducing the cost of diesel, and instead they increased the cost of kerosene significantly. And what this means to the common household is that people are having to pay more to be able to cook food in the evening, to be able to cook food at any given time of the day. And majority of the households use kerosene to be able to cook. And so people are having to think about other options like gas and electricity. Electricity prices have also gone up. So people feel the government is doing very little to address their concerns, and people feel like the government is just very distant to what is happening. In fact, in a televised interview, the Minister for Treasury just yesterday said that the government has done everything that it can do, but people feel that the government can do so much more, yet it's doing very little to address their concerns.
So if the protests resume, could they threaten the stability of the Kenyan government, Felix?
They'll definitely threaten the stability of the Kenyan government. In the year 2024 and 2025, we had nationwide protests, and they brought the country to a standstill. In fact, some of the protesters also broke into the Kenyan parliament. It almost got burnt down. That is what happens when people are frustrated, and this frustration is growing by the day. People have moved from just protesting for the sake of it, but protesting for survival. People do not have food. Young people do not have jobs. The government is not responding to their concerns. And so this constant frustration by the people could mean way worse things for the government, and the government of the day seems to be very distant from what is happening. So the more frustrated people become, it's the more the government will be unstable. And like in the last 24 hours, let's say 48 hours, the government has lost a lot of money in revenue that could have been generated by businesses. The government has lost a lot of money that could have been generated by public transport. The government has lost a lot of money, and business owners are also losing money, so they'll have to cut down on their employees, and that continues to frustrate people more as more people get to lose their jobs and life continues becoming difficult.
Truly desperate situation there. Felix, thank you very much. That was our correspondent Felix Moringa in Nairobi.